Tonight, the search for a mother and daughter from Gaza who were last seen alive in Israeli military custody. More than 2 years ago, Huda and Aisha were photographed blindfolded alongside Israeli soldiers. They then disappeared.
We want justice and someone held accountable. We want to know what happened to them. Where are they?
Now, Sky News team has pored over social media posts and satellite imagery to find out what happened before they went missing. This is just one family demanding answers. Human rights investigators say thousands more are trying to find relatives who vanished during the war. Our full special report is coming up. Plus, 2 people are self-isolating in the UK after being exposed to hantavirus. That's as a passenger on the cruise tells me they weren't told to stay in their rooms till it was too late.
We were not informed about the situation, and the ship management, I think, didn't know anything about the virus.
Plus, deal or no deal, Iran says it's assessing an American plan to end the war as Donald Trump threatens to resume bombing if talks fail. And nearly 2 million seats cancelled in nearly 2 weeks, how the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz is affecting global flights. That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. Tonight, I want to begin with the harrowing final moments of a mother and daughter in Gaza. To do that, I'm going to take you back to December 2023. It was 3 months into the war. Families were fleeing the city of Khan Yunis as Israeli tanks rolled in. Some decided to stay behind. Many of them were never seen again. This exclusive Sky News investigation began with this one photograph showing Huda and her mother, Aisha. Their family thought they were dead. Now they want answers, and they're just one family among potentially thousands. It's estimated 14,000 people are missing or under the rubble in Gaza. One Israeli human rights group says at least 800 of those cases were Palestinians last seen in Israeli custody. They say the practice amounts to legalized forced disappearance. We'll discuss whether it's being used systematically coming up after this report from our special correspondent, Alex Crawford.
This is a story of one family from Gaza, their terror and terrible loss and their fight for answers. It's a mystery about much-loved relatives who've disappeared and asks, is this Israeli policy? And how many others have vanished in Gaza? It's also the story of a single photograph. On the left of the picture is Huda al-Akkad. Next to her is her 78-year-old mother, Aisha. They're in the back of an Israeli military vehicle. There's no explanation from the Israeli military about why they're photographed like this, why they were detained, and very little detail about what happened to them afterwards. Their surviving family members are clinging to the hope that somehow their relatives are alive. They only discovered the picture recently, some 2 years after it was taken, and they urgently want answers.
By God, I demand justice. Our whole family does. We hope they're alive and we can get them out. We want a medical body, anybody, the Red Cross, anyone to stand with us, go through all the procedures and find out which prison they're in.
We want justice and someone held accountable. We want to know what happened to them. Where are they? Have they been killed by the Israelis? Are they in Israeli prison somewhere? We want to know.
We've been looking into the photograph with a team of investigative lawyers from around the world. We've pieced together the events leading up to the disappearance of the women. We've interviewed witnesses and surviving family and examined satellite images. We've compiled open-source intelligence and scrutinised the soldiers' social media posts. The Glan lawyers have been involved in several legal cases against Israel in recent years. Together, we're left with multiple worrying question marks about the women who disappeared.
This photograph, at the very least, illustrates that these 2 women were taken captive by the Israeli military in very degrading conditions.
As a human rights lawyer, it's one of the most worrying things that can happen when a state takes in people and makes them disappear.
When this is done systematically, it may amount to a crime against humanity.
We need to take you back to December 2023. A temporary truce between Israel and Hamas had broken down, and the Israeli military was launching what became known as fire belts in Gaza, a line of rapid aerial bombardments. Israeli troops then moved into the Khan Yunis area. The Al-Akkad family and thousands of others were ordered by the Israeli military to leave their homes. In the face of these military maneuvers, most of the Al-Akkad family fled, but their elderly parents, Mohammed and Aisha, refused to go, and 3 of their grown-up children stayed with them. They were sons Iyad and Zakaria and their daughter Huda. In this satellite image before the onslaught, we've highlighted the series of homes where the extended Al-Akkad family lived on 5th Street in the Al-Katiba neighbourhood. As the fighting became more intense, the relatives who'd already fled were begging their parents to leave too. They recorded a call thinking it would be their last. Their parents and siblings were now trapped with Israeli tanks on the street.
Hey!
2 different audio experts have told us the background sounds are consistent with drones, gunfire and explosions. Bakir rings his trapped brother Zakaria with his wife Tarir, who's frantic with worry.
ناموا في دار اياد روحوا قول لهم ناموا في دار اياد دقوش في هذا مش كويس خطر دقدوق يا من دقدوق محمد شعرضوا كلهم عارف ايش قلت لك انا عارف الحزام النار بدها يهجج كل العالم طب انت بتسمع صوت الدبابه غاضب بتحرط على الارض هذا عنده خش في الحكوره يا معلم خش والله يسوي
Satellite images from 6th of December show Israeli troops closing in. 80 vehicles are visible within a few kilometres of the house. Several are moving along a road that leads directly to the family's neighbourhood. The next day, the troops are much closer. 2 military bases can now be seen and have been established less than 400 metres from the house. By December 8th, there's heavy fighting and explosions around the nearby Al-Katiba mosque. The Israeli military says via telegram channels they've been attacked by Hamas fighters. 2 soldiers were killed in the fighting. The mosque was destroyed. The Israeli military announces the dead soldiers are from the Golani Brigade's Battalion 12 and issues videos of them operating. The same day, the trapped siblings say their father's been shot by Israeli snipers in his backyard and urgently needs help.
My brother called me and said, "Our father's wounded and we need an ambulance or the Red Cross. Get help from someone." I called the Red Cross and they said they couldn't go to 5th Street. I called the ambulance and they also said it's a combat zone and they couldn't get in.
The Israeli troops are still very active in the area. The trapped siblings frantically call and text that Israeli gunfire and armed drones are stopping them reaching their wounded father in the backyard. They watch from the house as he bleeds out and dies. His body's never been recovered. The siblings and their mother flee to a neighbour's house on the same street. The surviving family members lose contact with their trapped relatives around this time. Video taken from inside one of the Al-Akkad homes shows it was comprehensively trashed by the Israeli military action. Room after room is a pile of destruction. From one balcony, there's a glimpse of the rear. That is where their parents' home used to be and where Mohammed, their father, was shot whilst praying in the backyard. This is what the family returned to when the troops withdrew 4 months later. They found nothing but destruction and body parts.
When I went to the body, I didn't know who it was because half of it was missing. The body remained there for about 2 months.
Our investigations could not determine exactly how or why the 2 women ended up with the Israeli soldiers. Only the soldiers can answer that. But at least one witness said they saw the elderly Aisha clinging to her son Zakaria as troops dragged her away. The Sky News data and forensics team and the Glan investigators separately confirmed the identities of the 3 soldiers pictured in the Israeli military vehicle. The soldier far left is Lieutenant Ido Meir, commander of Leopard Platoon in the Golani Brigade's 12th Battalion. Next to him is Sergeant Dolev Mor Yusuf and then Amit Elyakov. Sergeant Mor Yusuf posted the photo on social media before hastily deleting it. None of them replied to our requests for comment. The IDF issued several videos at this time, including showing the 12th Battalion in the area the same day Mohammed was killed and around the time the 2 women and Zakaria disappeared. Soldiers from Leopard platoon also posted pictures of themselves there. In one, again geolocated, Sergeant Moore Yusuf is seen in what was once the Al-Akkad's backyard. Behind him is the Al-Akkad home where the interior video was taken. Sergeant Moore Yusuf is seen posing in another house with bulldozed land behind him and military vehicles. This one, again posted by Sergeant Moore Yusuf, shows the Leopard platoon with a sniper platoon. One of their members also posted on social media. Sniper Sasha Abramovich is geolocated to the same spot near the Al-Akkad homes, corroborating their claims of snipers operating where their father was killed. 5th Street, where the family used to live, is now unrecognisable. The whole area has been pulverised. All the Al-Akkad family homes have been destroyed, and with them the chance of any forensic assessment of exactly what happened and who might be buried was also destroyed. The survivors are now all living in tents and until recently believed all the relatives who'd stayed behind had been killed. Then they discovered Samar's husband Iyad was actually alive and in an Israeli prison. Her lawyer managed to visit him.
His condition is okay. He's thinner than before. He weighs about 60 kilograms. She told me he's fine, but he's got spots on his body.
So whose body parts were in the destruction of the family homes, and what happened to the two women after they were pictured with the Israeli soldiers? There's no record of the women in any Israeli prison and no record of their deaths.
We've sent all these letters and emails to a range of different commanders and Israeli authorities. We've got just one reply from an official Israeli military WhatsApp account, and an unnamed official replied to us saying that the incident had been referred for review. That was in February. They admitted that the women had been what they called temporarily detained along with others, but they say the women were released soon after in an area further from the troops' operational activity. But the Glan lawyers say that's not good enough.
It's not lawful for the Israeli military to go around detaining people arbitrarily, not keeping any records of why, not keeping any records of for how long, and not keeping any records of when they were released, let alone not releasing them in circumstances where they're safe.
Thousands of people have gone missing in Gaza since October 2023. A report this March by ISAP and the Palestine Reporting Lab found between 14 to 15,000 people remain unaccounted for. But it can't differentiate between those buried under rubble and those it describes as forcibly disappeared. Gaza's health ministry says that although thousands are still under the rubble, families believe this is not the case for around 3,000 relatives. The ICRC says it has even more reports of missing people still unresolved, between 5,000 and 6,000, with fears that many are being held incommunicado in Israeli detention centres. In many instances, these people were last seen in the custody of Israeli troops. The Israeli human rights group Hamaked says it has individually documented 800 such cases. A range of other organisations too have logged high numbers of people who vanished in Gaza after being last seen with Israeli troops, and many fear the high numbers point to a systemic policy.
We know of these hundreds of cases of people that have just disappeared after being held by the Israeli forces inside the Gaza Strip. These numbers and this policy that's been ongoing since the start of the war is clearly not an accident or some upheaval in the first days of the war. It's something systematic, and yeah, that's how we can say it's a policy.
Multiple organisations say appeals for information about missing people go unanswered by the Israeli military and the government bodies.
It's also very common, unfortunately, for people to be forcibly disappeared in the context of the ongoing war in Gaza. There's a significant level of complicity from different levels of the Israeli state and institutions with this practice. It's very difficult to obtain information, and attempts to do this through the legal system have so far mostly failed.
The suffering for the Al-Akkad family is in no way lessening. Like so many thousands of others, they're crying out for answers about what happened to their relatives who just vanished in Gaza.
And Alex joins me now. Alex, I mean, this extraordinary reporting there. But the fact is that there are still so many unanswered questions here about a mother and a daughter just vanishing, frankly, into thin air. I mean, not quite thin air, because we know they were last seen with the IDF.
There are a lot of questions, far too many questions and no real answers about what happened to them. And remember, we've just focused in on this one family, the Al-Akkad family, but this is a magnified hundreds, maybe thousands of times. We've got actual physical evidence that they were last seen with these soldiers. That is very, very rare. And I think without a photograph showing that they were with 3 Israeli soldiers at some time in a very compromising position, humiliating, the lawyers would argue, degrading condition where they're being taken pictures of whilst obviously in a vulnerable position. They must have been feeling extremely scared. They're blindfolded, and the soldier appears to be posing with an albeit dismantled gun, but they seem to think it's quite a happy affair taking in these 2 women. We know at the same time that there was a lot of combat activity going on in that area in Khan Yunis by the IDF's own statements, which were put out at the time. There was a lot of activity. Their father, Aisha's husband, had already died in front of them. And the IDF, despite our dozens and dozens of emails and messages to them, to the commanders in the chain of command, the soldiers themselves, IDF military, IDF authorities, the prison service, the government, ministers. I got one WhatsApp message, which was the same when I asked again several months later, exactly the same, a sort of copy and paste, a lack of willingness by the IDF authorities or the Israeli authorities to engage with us. And this was an investigation which involved, I'd say, about 10 or a dozen different journalists in Gaza, our very, very courageous team out there, the family themselves, who we gained the trust of. And remember, at the moment, any family in Gaza who feels nervous about talking to journalists because they feel that may lead to them being targeted. We also had our Sky News data and forensics team. We collaborated with the GLAN legal investigators who are spread across the world in Ireland and Brazil, as well as in Gaza. And we spoke to Gaza lawyers who are trying to find out some answers. And I think this speaks to a much wider issue. Because remember, this is over more than 2 years. There are literally hundreds or thousands of people who have just vanished with no concrete answer. They're not believed to have been killed in airstrikes. They're not believed to have been killed in crossfire or anything. They've just disappeared, and many of them have been linked and last seen in the vicinity, in the presence of Israeli troops. And that has got to be very worrying, not just for the Israeli authorities, not just for the Israeli military, who boasts about being the most moral army in the world. So these people deserve an answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex, we're going to keep you there because I'm going to bring in Daniel Shenha, head of the legal department at Human Rights Group Hamaked. Thank you very much, Daniel. You were, of course, in Alex's report, and we saw you there in that very detailed report about this family, the Al-Akkad family. But just one of the points that Alex was just making there, I mean, enforced disappearance is obviously against international law. The IDF hasn't been very forthcoming with information about what's happened to this mother and her elderly, her daughter and this elderly mother. But of course, one of the other things that's prohibited under international law is the fact that they're saying they just dropped them off into a conflict zone without anyone having any idea where they are, when they disappeared, when they came back. You know, no real answers here.
Yes. First of all, thanks for having me. This is an excruciating issue for me personally. We've been working on this topic since the start of the war. And like Alex said before, this unfortunately is not an isolated case. It was a normal procedure for the Israeli army to make people disappear. And this is exactly, this case of the Al-Akkad family is very telling, because it's, we have the picture, we have the army even admitted that they were holding these two women because of the picture. Hamoked, well, there was a complete breakdown of documentation of arrests in Gaza, of information sharing with outside sources, with families after the war broke out. Only Hamoked has dealt with 5,000 cases of families calling us since the start of the war, telling us that their loved ones had been detained or have been taken by army soldiers. And about a third of these cases, almost 1,700 people, we've received an answer saying that there was no indication of their detention. And in many of these cases, people, their family members saw soldiers taking their loved ones or holding them in checkpoints. And then, people just disappeared after being held by army soldiers. And we assume that in many cases, people were probably left alone in combat zones without any care or any oversight of what's happening to them. Of course, these are multiple infractions of international law. This is breaking the law on every level, and it's yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that came out of the, what you discussed with Alex in her report was, is this systematic or not? And when we look at these numbers, I mean, the ICRC is putting the numbers at somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000. You say Hamoked has documented, looked at these 5,000, 6,000 number, but documented 800. From your point of view, was this and is this systematic?
When you look at the numbers, we're not talking about 5, 10, which is also too much. But if we would have been talking about the first days of the war, chaos, the fog of war, it takes time till the military builds up some documentation process inside Gaza. No, we're talking about things that went on for 2 years. The military was knowledgeable about what was happening. We were petitioning the court. We were sending letters to the army, stressing that this is a problem that's ongoing, that people are disappearing, that we're not getting any answers. So the highest court in Israel knew about this. The highest echelons of the army knew about this, and nobody did anything. So we can't say that this is sporadic, that this is a mistake. It was a policy that led to enforced disappearance, a mass enforced disappearance of Gazans. So yes, this is unfortunately a system, a practice that was systematic.
Just briefly, Daniel, the big question then is, how can there possibly be any accountability when there has clearly been a breach of international law and these families want answers?
Yes, the problem is, first and foremost, that inside Israel, we've kind of reached a dead end. We've tried to climb the legal ladder to find some answers within the Israeli system. And it seems that the military is not willing to investigate or come to any conclusions. I fear that the military is incapable of getting any answers, because for 2 years they haven't done anything, any documentation whatsoever. They completely washed their hands of reporting on people who were detained. They said they had no duty to do that. So for 2 years, this was a normal procedure. So people disappeared and they have no record of it. The High Court of Justice missed hundreds of opportunities to get into this issue, to try to intervene. They just went along with the state and dismissed our petitions offhand. So now we're kind of in a situation that only if the army is now going to open post-factum investigations, then we might be able to get some answers. But I'm afraid that there will be many people who vanish and we won't be able to ascertain their fate knowing that what happened to them in the end or right now. So I guess we're in a kind of a problem inside the Israeli system. But what we have been doing at Hamoked and other organizations like ours, we've been documenting this, GLAN, like you mentioned in your report.
Yeah.
So documenting, we have files and we have the information available. So maybe it will be of some use outside or in international legal fora.
Daniel, we're really grateful for your time and your work. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm going to come back to you in a moment, Alex, but I just want to remind our viewers of how the IDF responded to our investigation. A spokesperson said the individuals mentioned are not being held by the IDF, and there is no indication that they were held in IDF detention facilities. The incident has been referred for review. They went on during operational activity by IDF troops. Several individuals were temporarily detained in the field. The women were released in the Gaza Strip shortly thereafter. Alex, the point that you've been making throughout our conversation and in your report, the fact that they're saying they just dropped them off somewhere, we don't know, and frankly, this is just not an isolated case. It is, as Daniel said, happened to hundreds, if not thousands of people.
Well, we know that that area was extremely volatile at that time, and we know that around the time that the surviving family lost contact with the trapped relatives, the IDF was engaged in bombing mosques and razing houses along their very street, and they'd lost 2 IDF soldiers. So you can imagine that there was quite a lot of tension and tense feelings, emotions around that time. The lawyers, the GLAN lawyers, as well as the lawyers that I've spoken to from a range of different human rights organisations, all agree that international humanitarian law requires any soldier, any military army who detains civilians, which these women clearly were. There's no doubt one was nearly 80 years old. The other one was her daughter, who was 41. They should be logged. There should be a log of who you detain, where you detain them, the reasons why they've been detained, and if you release them, as the IDF has admitted shortly afterwards, and they appear to be alive and all right, there should be a log of exactly where they've dropped off, and there is a requirement on the soldiers to drop them off in an area which is entirely safe. And it seemed, certainly by the IDF's own admission, that that area was not safe. It was absolutely blowing up on an hourly, daily basis. So there are lots and lots of very worrying questions which still have to be answered. And as Hamoked have said, ICRC have said, and remember ICRC has not been allowed access to any detention facilities since October the 7th, 2023. So they do not know, they can't match and resolve where these people are. And that is extremely worrying, and also makes the families, of which there are hundreds, possibly thousands of individuals involved in this, very anxious about what's happened to their relatives, and also the lack of accountability. But primarily, they want answers. Are they alive? Could they somehow be in a detention centre still alive, or in a prison somewhere still alive, or are they dead? And that continual unknowing is very worrying for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for all of your reporting, Alex, and thank you for joining us this evening. Now to the rest of the day's news, and scientists tracking a deadly outbreak have confirmed 5 cases of hantavirus linked to an outbreak on board a cruise ship. In the past half an hour, health officials here have said 2 British passengers who left the cruise early are self-isolating in the UK. 2 seriously ill crew members were also airlifted to hospital. Here's our science correspondent, Thomas Moore.
The 2 crew members infected by hantavirus, one of them British, were brought to shore by medics protected by full hazmat suits. Alongside them, a close contact of a passenger who died earlier this week. No chances are being taken with this deadly and unusual outbreak. They were transferred by ambulance to aircraft medically equipped to keep them stable on a flight to specialist hospitals in the Netherlands. Just over 140 people remain on board, including this passenger from Jordan.
We're still on the ship off the coast of Cape Verde. From what I understand, we're currently the biggest news story in the world, but so far everything is fine. Everyone on the ship is okay. I just wanted to reassure you that nothing has happened.
The MV Honduras left Ushuaia in Argentina on April the 1st with 150 people on board. We know that on the 11th, a Dutch passenger died at sea. The following day, the ship's captain told other passengers.
One of our passengers sadly passed away last night. Tragic as it is, it was due to natural causes, we believe. I'm told by the doctor we're not infectious.
But as the ship sailed on, the situation became more serious. On the 25th, the man's wife flew with his body from the mid-Atlantic island of St Helena to Johannesburg in South Africa. She became unwell during the flight and was admitted to hospital on arrival. She died a day later. The ship sailed on to Ascension Island, where on the 27th of April, a British man with respiratory symptoms disembarked and was flown to South Africa. He remains in a critical but stable condition. On the 2nd of May, a German national who had developed pneumonia and a fever died on the ship, which arrived in the archipelago of Cape Verde the next day with 2 crew showing symptoms. And Swiss authorities have said there is a new case, a man who had been a passenger on the ship and developed symptoms after returning on a flight from South America. He's in a Zurich hospital. His wife is also in quarantine as a precaution. Medical authorities say it seems to be rare human-to-human spread of the Andes strain of hantavirus. The ship's owners have said it will sail for the Canary Islands, where regional authorities originally refused permission for it to dock, but that appears to have been overruled by the national Spanish government.
Once the evacuation of all the asymptomatic people has concluded in Cape Verde, the ship will continue towards the Canaries, where it's expected to arrive in the next 3 days at the secondary port of Granadia de Abona. It's a port with very little activity. Once there, a joint sanitary evaluation and evacuation mechanism will be launched to repatriate all passengers, unless medical conditions prevent it.
The ship is expected to reach Tenerife at the weekend, the end of what was supposed to be the cruise of a lifetime, but became a medical nightmare. Thomas Moore, Sky News.
Well, you'll remember that video in Thomas's report showing the moment the captain told passengers about the first death. That was filmed by the Turkish YouTuber Ruhu Çenet. I spoke to him earlier about the impact of the outbreak. Just have a listen.
It was very shocking because we were on board with these people for 24 days straight. We had relationships. So I knew these people, and I'm very sad that they're going through this human crisis. I just wish them to get well. And now that they are being taken care of, and the World Health Organization is very keen on the topic, I'm very hopeful for their situation.
Of course, you were on board for 24 out of the 36 days that this, these people were on this cruise ship. You left earlier, but you were there when the first person died. Just tell me about that and whether it raised any sort of suspicions about what this might be.
Yeah, on 12th of April, we were called to launch area at 9 a.m. Usually we had meetings around like 6 p.m. or 6:30 p.m. So this was unusual, and we saw captain before the announcement. This was also unusual for us. We thought that there was something wrong with the weather, the plans. Maybe the weathercast was going to be very rough. That's what we were thinking initially. Then captain said one of the passengers sadly passed away, and it was due to natural causes. We're not we're not in infection. There's no contagious disease, something like that. So this was a relaxing explanation, but this was not the case, because the first death was because of the hantavirus. And after this announcement, we were not ready or we were not isolated for what was to come. We were together during breakfast, lunch, and dinner timings in the dining room all together. There was open buffet, and we had lecture sessions, group activities. Still, even after the day that we had someone passed away, until my last day, 24th of April, we didn't take any cautions. We were not informed about the situation, and the ship management, I think, didn't know anything about the virus. So they didn't have the necessary equipment or a lab. So I cannot put the full blame on them, but at least they should have been more considerate on the possibility of a contagious disease.
Yeah, so you say nothing fundamentally changed after the first death, but you disembarked from the cruise liner just the day before the second person died, who was the partner of the first person who died on board. Did that raise major alarms? Did you get a better sense of what was actually going on?
Yeah, I think his partner was not looking good for her last couple of days on board. I saw her not standing upright properly, and she looked not okay. So I think everyone thought that she was having a very deep grief. That's what we thought. And after we disembarked to St. Helena, she was with us. She was on the same flight to Johannesburg from St. Helena. We saw her on a wheelchair, which was also unusual. She had no problem of walking. So after she passed away, even though I'm not on board anymore, I heard from the passengers that they are now in isolation, and they're wearing masks. They're not having meal times altogether. So they are in their cabin. But these kind of cautions are taking place, but they are late. So I wish that we were quicker to respond.
That's Ruhi Chenet, a YouTuber there. So what is this virus and how does it spread? Well, it comes transmitted through the urine or saliva of rodents. Infected particles become airborne and can be breathed in by humans. Initial symptoms are very similar to the flu and include muscle aches, fever, headache and coughs that can later develop into a serious infection of the lung or the kidneys, leading to organ failure. The incubation period, that's the time from infection to when the first symptoms appear, is around 2 to 4 weeks. Let's speak now to Nika Alexander. She's the World Health Organization's Emergencies Communications Manager. Thank you so much, Nika, for joining us here on the programme. We're just speaking to someone there who was on that ship and said that when the first death took place, frankly, the staff on the ship had no idea and didn't really manage it in the way that you would think that there would be some kind of infectious disease spreading on this ship. I just want to get your reaction to that, the fact that, they just treated it like it was just a death on board and didn't sort of take into consideration some of these other factors.
I think, as he explained so eloquently, everybody didn't know until later. When they did realize what they were dealing with, they took all the right precautions. It can take some time to figure these things out. The doctor or the medical staff must have made some assumptions early on based on their judgment of the situation. We're not there to see it, and we can't really second guess what they were evaluating at that time. And I think the passenger also said it really well at the end. In retrospect, you always wish that you had known earlier and had done a better job. We all do in all these responses. We all wish we could have been better.
Is the World Health Organization now assessing the situation, and do you deem it as a public health emergency, or do you feel that it can still be contained?
We've seen that it can still be contained. Now, there were 147 passengers, 3 disembarked, 3 health workers have joined them. So there are still 147 people. Of those, 8 people have become sick. That's very scary. 3 people have died, but we haven't seen further onward spread once those measures, again, that your guest spoke about, once those control measures were put in place, the control is effective. This isn't a new virus. It has been around. We've known about it for a good 30 years now. Every year there are a few hundred cases in some parts of the world, a few thousand in other parts of the world. So we, as in the collective health community, knows how to manage this virus.
Are you and do you believe that there is environmental contamination on this ship, that it could potentially spread beyond that, or rodent contamination on the ship at this point?
A few facts I can share with you now. One is that the boat had its most recent inspection, I believe, in the normal timeframes in November. Last year, there was nothing unusual. I'm sure they're doing very strict cleaning now. Also, if you look back at the epidemiology, the first people to become sick had come from Argentina, where some rodents are known to be infected with hantavirus. So the investigation to find the source is still ongoing. But what has been very reassuring is how cooperative the ship's operators have been, how communicative they have been with us, with authorities from other countries, the countries of the affected passengers, and with the passengers themselves as well. So that's always very reassuring when there's a flow of information and a responsiveness to the advice that we're providing them.
We're talking about, at present, the virus being contained, within this ship, but from what we know from our guest that we just spoke to, he left 24 days in. This whole journey was 36 days in. He left shortly after the first person died. He got on an aircraft. He travelled back to his home country. A number of other passengers did the same. Could that then, cause a further outbreak and infection, human-to-human contact on an aircraft or, in other places that they may be in?
So most of the people who traveled were well and weren't showing symptoms. One of the person who traveled was unwell and did have symptoms, and that means she was contagious. All of these points mean it's very important to do contact tracing. And in this case, it's international contact tracing across modes of transportation, across multiple dates. So many, many people are involved. We know that, for example, for the flight where the wife who died in South Africa, the flight she was on, the passengers on that flight have been contacted. For the person who's in hospital in Zurich as well, there's follow-up with the people he and his spouse were in contact with. So that's why the contact tracing is so important, precisely for what you said, in case somebody was exposed and might be getting sick. So it's important that all those people are aware that they were in contact with someone and what to do if they're feeling unwell. That's exactly what happened with the patient in Zurich. He had heard from the ship's operators about the outbreak, and he knew once he started to feel unwell to contact his doctor, and his doctor urged him to go to the hospital, which is exactly what he did.
But that's the point, isn't it? You said those who left the ship were cleared, but it takes something like 2 to 4 weeks to show the symptoms. So it could be that you don't realise you have it at the time and you have the all clear. But like the patient in Zurich, it comes up weeks later.
It could, and that's why, in a way, if nobody is sick in those 3, 4, 6, even up to 8 weeks, that's good. Meaning while they're traveling, they're not making somebody else sick. If it takes a while before they feel sick, and that's when they're more contagious, when they're having those symptoms, as long as they are aware that they need to be cautious and shouldn't take a sniffle or a cold or feeling unwell lightly, they should take those symptoms very seriously, because they could have a dangerous disease and they could be making someone else sick. As long as they take that seriously, contact healthcare providers, then that makes everybody safer.
Nika Alexander from the World Health Organization, thank you very much for joining us. Now, we've been here before. Donald Trump seems to think the US is close to an agreement with Iran to end the war. And in what appears to be a gesture of good faith, the US president has agreed to scrap his so-called Project Freedom, escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz just days after introducing it. Tehran has confirmed that it is assessing proposals from Washington. So could this be the beginning of the end of the conflict?
They want to make a deal. We've had very good talks over the last 24 hours, and it's very possible that we'll make a deal. This is very simple. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. because as tough as they are, we want to keep them alive. We want to keep all of you alive. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and they won't. And they've agreed to that, among other things.
That was Donald Trump earlier. Let's go straight to our David Blevins for more. And I mean, David, regardless of how many times it feels like we've been here before, what is clear is that the United States wants a deal, and of course Iran to some extent wants this deal and needs this deal as well.
Yes, and it felt like something really had shifted, because we went from Pete Hegseth, the man who calls himself Secretary of War, and Marco Rubio, the man who oversees US foreign policy as Secretary of State, telling us that the war was over and they were now focused on Project Freedom, ensuring safe passage through the strait, to the President himself suddenly telling us he had paused Project Freedom because they were making such progress in negotiations. But just how close are they to a deal? A few hours ago, the President posted online that if Iran keeps its word, then the Strait of Hormuz will be open to all, and if it doesn't, the bombing will resume with even greater intensity. Could it be that 9 weeks of war has had such an impact on Iran's economy, on America's economy, on the global economy, because much of the world's oil supply has nowhere to go, that one or both sides has capitulated? That would certainly align with these reports of a one-page document being drawn up, a framework, if you like, for future negotiations. In other words, they may be kicking the can down the road in relation to the thorny issue of Iran's nuclear capability. Yesterday, Marco Rubio said they didn't have to reach a deal in one day. They just needed to be clear about which topics they wanted to negotiate on in future. It felt like a throwaway comment at the time, but it now has greater significance. Donald Trump says Iran badly wants a deal. They'll get there, but he's not going to set a deadline. But amid these reports that he may detour on his way to China next week to sign a deal in Islamabad, he told the New York Post, "I won't be doing that because we're not close enough to a deal." So your head must be spinning by now, Yalda, and in answer to your question, yes, we've been here before, and I very much suspect we'll be here again.
Yeah, it is head spinning. David, thank you so much. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, worried for your summer getaways. We'll bring you flight cancellation data that suggests things aren't looking good.
A lot of local and national seats are up for grabs.
Waiting for the people's vote on who will sit in them. It's your chance to have a say on who has a seat at the table. Follow Sky News as we give you the best seats in the House.
From voting
to the results,
the analysis,
and what comes next. Join us for Vote 26. Get the full story fast on Sky News.
With respect, Minister, answer the question. It's you. Hello and welcome. I'm Cathy Newman. So could the outcome of these elections be manipulated? New me, new show, new furniture. Hard news needs a hard chair. I feel like I'm in therapy. Oh, there's room for two on this one. Do you think people will take me seriously with my feet up?
Sorry, madam, but we're closing now.
Oh, sorry. Sofa sorted. Let's get this show on the road.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
A lot of local and national seats are up for grabs.
Waiting for the people's vote on who will sit in them. It's your chance to have a say on who has a seat at the table. Follow Sky News as we give you the best seats in the House.
From voting
to the results, the analysis, and what comes next. Join us for Vote 26. Get the full story fast on Sky News.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting, what appear to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me, and I'll explain why you can't hear the call.
100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement.
It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
These immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
I'm observing what you're doing.
This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's very positive.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to in the Rose Garden, in the East Wing?
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now? I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They will be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
For anyone hoping to jet away on holiday this summer, the data on flight cancellations in the past month will make for worrying reading. Airlines are scrambling to cope with their biggest crisis since the COVID-19 pandemic, as their lifeblood, jet fuel, threatens to dry up. Here's our business and economics correspondent, Paul Kelso.
The Iran war has got airlines and governments worried about jet fuel and the prospect of shortages. The UK government this weekend has given airlines permission to cancel flights on some routes without facing penalties if they need to save fuel. And that raises the obvious question, is that going to affect summer holidays? We've got some new data that starts to help us answer that question. Let's start at the beginning. The first thing to say is that jet fuel is a real problem. This is why the price has gone up relatively faster and further than any oil product since the Strait of Hormuz was blocked. It spiked immediately after the war began. It's come down a bit. It's still more than double practically where it was, $14,000 a tonne, and that's because supply has been profoundly interrupted. Production is around 500,000 barrels a day short of global demand because the Gulf is effectively closed. Kuwait, Saudi, major exporters, and China has imposed an export ban, and that started to impact flight scheduling. In response, airlines are cutting flights, optimising their schedules, getting rid of non-profitable routes and thinning out schedules, the aim being to try and fly the same number of passengers on fewer flights. We've got some new data that tells us what's happened over 11 days in April. These are flights scheduled for May. 13,000 flights, more than, have been cancelled for May around the world. That's nearly 2 million seats in total. Now, that sounds like a lot. It is a lot, but it's a relatively small amount of the global total. Barely 1.5% for both flights and seats. If it tells us anything, it tells us we really do fly a very great deal. Now, the data is from analyst Cirium, and we've broken it down, analysed it to try and see how it breaks down. First, by airports. We've looked at the largest cuts by airport, the most changes, and they largely follow the size of airports around the world. Nearly 4% of flights, the red lines, and 2% in blue there. Atlanta, Hartsfield-Jackson, that's the world's busiest airport by passenger numbers. Then Beijing, then some big US airports until we get down. The first European airport here is Heathrow. Around 1% of flights, 0.5% of seats have been cut. Now, we've had a look at this again by UK domestic airports. It tells us something quite interesting about what's going on. Look at the most affected here. Nearly 20% of flights at Birmingham Airport affected, more than 10% of seats. Next is London City, Newcastle and Manchester, Stansted and Gatwick. That tells us that point-to-point airports, precisely the ones that scheduled holiday and package flights run from, are the most affected here. And that's why there's so much concern about whether your holiday will be affected. Now, the Transport Secretary says there is not currently disruption to jet fuel supplies, but the government plainly is planning for exactly that. For now, as long as airlines are offering flights, you should take that in good faith and book them. The price has not soared, which suggests the industry thinks this is going to be sorted. But the longer the blockade of the Gulf goes on, the greater the chance your flight could be affected.
Paul Kelso there. And of course, throughout the programme, we've been talking about this potential deal between Iran and the United States. Donald Trump says they're close. There is a one-page memorandum of understanding that is floating around, and apparently both sides are willing to make certain concessions. So we'll be monitoring that particular story over the coming days to see whether or not this time, like any other time that we've seen, there is going to be some kind of deal. And that's it from me and the team for tonight. The World returns tomorrow from 9 p.m. Good night.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood has rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty.
War isn't pretty.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking,
Thank you so much.
trusting us to tell her story.
The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access.
Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget.
Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?